Now we will know about different dimensions of language planning. There are three major dimensions of language planning: status planning, corpus planning, acquisition planning. Some scholars also suggest a fourth dimension, that is prestige planning. Now we will know what each one of these mean and describe each of these. So the first step in any language planning exercise is status planning. The status planning refers to the allocation of new functions to a language, such as using the language as medium of instruction or as an official language. It affects the role a language plays within a given society. The decision to use Hebrew as a medium of instruction in Jewish schools in Palestine from the end of the 19th century, or Hebrew becoming the national language of Israel after its formation in 1948, are examples of status planning. Status planning deals with initial choice of language, including attitudes towards alternative languages, political implications of the choice, etc. It is the stage at which status is allocated to a language: national language, official language, state official language, medium of instruction in school, to be taught as a subject in school, use in media, etc. So basically what we do here is that we allocate a role or give a status to a language. Next comes corpus planning. So corpus planning, which is concerned with the internal structure of the language. Typical activities of corpus planning include devising a writing system for a spoken language, initiating spelling reforms, coining new terms and publishing primers, grammar books, etc. A central aspect of corpus planning and language planning per se is language standardization, which can be understood as the creation and establishment of a uniform linguistic norm. Uniform standardized language, codified grammar and script are part of corpus planning, along with building vocabulary for new technical words and new domains of usages like schools, media, administration, etc. For this purpose, special institutions are also set, for example, Kendriya Hindi Sansthan or Central Institute of Indian Languages in India. So now it is important for us to understand the relation between status and corpus planning. Although language planners separate corpus and status planning conceptually, it is necessary to understand that the two dimensions interact closely with each other. The allocation of new language functions, that is status planning, often requires changes in the linguistic system, that is corpus planning, such as the development of new styles, official usages, applications, notices, circulars, use in media, education, etc., and lexical items, that is new vocabulary. A good example of the interaction of status and corpus planning is the above mentioned adoption of Hebrew as medium of instruction in Palestine. The change in language status made it necessary to expand the vocabulary of classical Hebrew in order to provide terms for the teaching of modern school subjects such as chemistry, physics, and biology in Jewish schools of Palestine. So next is acquisition planning. Efforts to spread and promote the learning of a language are described as instances of acquisition planning. Promoting education in a language from school level to university level, or cultural institutions such as the British Council or the Goethe Institute are set up and supported by their respective governments to promote the learning of English and German as second languages in other countries. Training of teachers is also a part of acquisition planning. So all of these are part of acquisition planning. So basically in acquisition planning, what we do is that language in education planning, it also is concerned with language teaching and learning, development of school curricula for the language and in the language, and teaching it to the second language learners. In any nation, language acquisition planning is done according to the status given to the language concerned. Programs like National Literacy Mission, Adult Literacy Mission are part of acquisition planning. So the acquisition planning deals with how the population is going to acquire or learn the language, in what ways the language can be promoted. The fourth step is prestige planning. It aims to influence how the language is perceived both by speakers and non-speakers and the respect that is accorded to it. It is directed towards creating a favorable psychological background, which is crucial for the long-term success of language planning activities. Prestige planning is vital when the promoted language has previously been limited to low culture functions. We can discuss more on this in the class and on other parts of language planning as well. Now let's discuss about the process of language planning. These were the dimensions of language planning, and now we will discuss about the process of language planning. The process of language planning has 4 steps: selection, codification, elaboration, and implementation. These steps are similar to those that are taken for standardization process, as the standardization of language is also a part of language planning. Selection is part of status planning, that is, what variety language has to be selected for what purpose, what status we have to give to a language, what function it has to perform, official language, provincial language, medium of instruction, to be used in media, to be used as a subject, and so on. Codification and elaboration are part of corpus planning. Codifying the grammar, grammatication, conventions of writing, graphization, and standard vocabulary, lexicalization, etc. Deciding on what features are acceptable in the standard, thus minimizing variation, thus producing grammars, primers, dictionaries, and thesaurus for the standard language. Now comes elaboration. Elaboration is terminological and stylistic development of the codified language to make possible its use in new domains that has been assigned to it. Implementation is the next step, and it is often done by the governments. It can be enforced by law. In Canada, in Quebec, French has to be used for all areas of public life. Or there can be encouragement rewards for using a language or training program. Hindi Pakwada, rewarding employees who work more in Hindi, as we do here in India. Implementation is part of acquisition planning. Now we will discuss about the approaches to language planning. The first approach that we will discuss is instrumental approach. The instrumental approach, as expressed in the work of Punyashloka Ray and Walter Towley, views languages as mere tools of communication, necessarily imperfect in their natural state. The central aim of language planning, according to this approach, is the methodological improvement of the linguistic system based on a language ideal, which is characterized not only by linguistic efficiency, that is, it should be easy to learn and use, and communicative adequacy, you should be able to communicate whatever you have to in this language, but also by uniformity and beauty, because they view uniformity as beautiful. The possible symbolic value of a language or language variety as an expression of group solidarity and identity is largely ignored in this approach, and language attitudes which might run counter to the acceptance of proposed linguistic improvements or status changes are believed to be easily changeable by propaganda and exercise of political power. It is at times referred to as linguistic engineering, which often focuses on changes affecting the language corpus and perceives language planning as a mere technical linguistic exercise. However, the acceptability does not depend on linguistic criteria alone. We know that languages are spoken in society and human beings attach a lot of value to the language that they speak. Apart from the communication function that language performs, it also has a lot of other symbolic values attached to it, and that is the reason why Esperanto, an artificial language, could not become the language of international communication. Today, it is used by a few thousand people, and native speakers are even less in number, because people, as I just told you, attach identity, culture, history, and other values to languages they speak. If a policy is not paying heed to people's attitudes towards language, then it is unlikely to work. We cannot force policies down the throat of people. It will backfire. It also means that people who plan and people who make policies should be sensitive towards the needs, beliefs, and rights of the people for whom the policies are being designed. Next approach is sociolinguistic approach. The sociolinguistic approach to language planning stresses the social and symbolic context of language use and the importance of language attitudes. Since languages are embedded in the social life of their users, or speakers, I should say, language planning cannot proceed successfully by considering purely linguistic questions alone. Effective planning depends on the understanding of the relevant social, cultural, political, and historical variables, knowledge of language attitudes, and the direction of social change in a given society. From this, it follows that linguists are not the only one whose expertise is needed in language planning. Political scientists, economists, sociologists, educationists, and anthropologists also have important roles to play. Such policies are more likely to succeed. That's why policy studies, where we study about policies and how policies are formed, is a multidisciplinary area of study. The need to develop a sociolinguistic approach to language planning is emphasized by the fact that language planning activities often form part of a wider social engineering and are employed to achieve non-linguistic goals such as socioeconomic modernization or national integration. That is why in India we have different languages recognized as state official languages, and Hindi and English work at the union level so that we can have local demands and aspirations at rest without compromising on national integration and interstate or state and centered communication. So, socio-economic development is important, modernization is also important, national integration is important, but including the needs and demands of the people, especially the people who form the linguistic and cultural minorities, so that they are not ignored and marginalized. Now let's have a look at language policy of India. First, the constitutional provisions. Four chapters in part 17 of Constitution are about languages. Article 343 to 351 of the Indian Constitution deals with the issue of official languages at the level of state and the level of judiciary. Eighth schedule of the Indian Constitution has 22 official languages. Article 350 of the Constitution states that language of grievances could be any official languages of India. Article 350A, use of mother tongue in primary education for children belonging to minority language groups. Right to mother tongue education goes back to 1931 Karachi Rights Declaration of Congress. In 1938, a committee of the Central Advisory Board of Education supported one of the perpetual demands of linguistic minorities by espousing the cause of mother tongue instruction in primary school and official support for this and for use at higher level as well. So this is a demand that is a very old demand, and this is something that the Constitution of India provides for. That is mother tongue instruction, at least at the primary level, for children belonging to minority language groups. Now, Article 350B, it is about appointment of a special officer for linguistic minorities. Commissioner of Linguistic Minorities submits annual report to the President of India about the condition of minority languages in any state and what remedial measures, if any, are required. Now, Article 347, a substantial portion of the population of a state, and not only a part thereof, desires the use of any language spoken by them to be recognized by the state, then it may be recognized by the state. Article 345, it states that a state can adopt any or more of the languages in use in a state for all or any of the purpose. Language in use should not be spoken by less than 15% of the population of the state. So this is one condition.